Hello! We're back in the library, where we once again have lighting on one side of my face, because I'm too lazy to set up a whole lighting rig that you... And Nigel is here moving my camera around. Today, instead, we're going to try to get through on some of my backlog of book reviews. This is Nigel, who was helping with the camera before, by the way. First on my list of backlog, we have Radio Silence. So I'm going to use my phone to read the synopsis, and then we're going to talk about the book. Frances has been a steady machine with one goal. Nothing will stand in her way. Not friends. Not a guilty secret. Not even the person she is on the inside. Then Frances meets Aled, and for the first time she's unafraid to be herself. So when the fragile trust between them is broken, Frances is caught between who she was and who she longs to be. Now Frances knows she has to confront her past, to confess why Karis disappeared. Frances is going to need every bit of courage that she has. So for a long time I kept hearing, read Radio Silence, read Radio Silence. You want an asexual character, why haven't you read Radio Silence yet? So this book was hyped to the heavens for me, and I did enjoy myself. But I have it at 4 stars on my Goodreads, but I might even be inclined to take it down to a 3 at this point, because enough time has passed, and it just... You know how some books stick with you, they stay in your soul? This one didn't. And that's really disappointing because for so many people it did stay in their soul and it was like a beautiful book they needed. It was fine, I enjoyed it while I was reading it, but it hasn't stuck with me. Let's go over my notes, shall we? We have the very, very classic trope of the girl who is overworked. Whether she is a woman who's overworked at her job or a teenage girl who is overworked with schoolwork, she is focused, she is driven, she is overworked. She doesn't have time for your things like friends or romance. She has work to do. But she is also a bit of a fan of this somewhat niche podcast that is a mixture... let me just read what I wrote. It is Welcome to Night Vale if it was written by teenaged Neil Gaiman. If that makes sense to you, that gives you a pretty solid picture of what the podcast was like. And if you're wondering, yes, Welcome to Night Vale does exist also in this book. It is referenced. Nigel just really wants to hit me in the face with his tail today. Something I noticed right away about this main character is she has a tendency to form obsessive relationships, obsessive friendships, which is something that I definitely relate to, especially when I was younger. I've gotten better about it as an adult, but when I was younger, I used to find people that I really wanted to be friends with, and I would latch on way too hard, so hard that I kind of overwhelmed them and they didn't want to be my friends anymore. Did that with a few people and it wasn't great. And so I relate to this with this character. As was briefly mentioned in the synopsis, the character of Karis, I believe it is, who is the main character's best friend slash crush, question mark, has run away, and the main character blames herself for that. There are themes in this book of abusive parents, so if that is a trigger for you, go into this knowing that. I don't think the main character's parents are the ones that are abusive. Again, I'm struggling because this book didn't stick with me as much as I thought it would. The message of this book is very standard YA fare. It's very simple. It's the finding yourself, coming of age story, but it's the trappings of it that make it more interesting, which is something we can learn from this book, because so many people are like, I don't want to use this or that trope, and everybody's got their favorite tropes and tropes that they hate, but some people believe that like tropes are just as a blanket shouldn't be used or should be avoided, when in reality it's how you dress them up, it's what you do with them that makes or breaks a trope. So having a really common theme like coming of age, still perfectly fine as long as you can make the story interesting while you're doing it. And this book did a pretty good job. There were also themes of mental health and teens struggling with mental health, which is good to see. I'm glad that a lot more young adult books, contemporary young adult that I'm seeing, are sort of working on teens with mental health issues, especially I'm seeing more addressing mental health as less of like, this character has anxiety and that's their one character trait. This character has depression. Or it might even be, this character is depression. They have nothing else. They are just depression. The main character is also biracial and bisexual. So we have got some diversity going on, and I enjoyed that quite a bit. But I really found myself wishing that the podcast part of this book was stronger and we saw more of it. It was something that a lot of people were like hitting me with, other than the fact that there's an asexual character. They were like, oh, the podcast angle is so cool. You know, check that out for that. And I was like, okay, well, it must be a really big part of the book. And then It was there. It was definitely an element of the book, but the podcast itself and the parts of that were actually kind of overshadowed by a lot of other stuff in the book. One thing that amused me is, and this is like a light spoiler, after a little while, the character who has the podcast gets revealed to his school as the guy who has the podcast, and the school is like, OMG! But not because, like, they all listen to the podcast, not because they're like, oh my gosh, we love this guy, we've been listening. Like, they just are impressed that he has one, or that he's on YouTube, and I'm like, no one's impressed with that anymore. Zero people, if you tell people you're on YouTube, no one is impressed. Trust me, I've tried it many times. Oh, what do you do for a hobby? Oh, I'm on YouTube. And they just look at you like you've become a rock, the most boring person in the world. So the fact that his whole school starts buzzing just because they find out he has a podcast on YouTube is not very realistic. I also really like that so much young adult contemporary is including fandom so much more. Now, maybe it's just what I'm reading, but fandom is becoming more prevalent in the young adult reads that I find, and I really love to see it. And I honestly wish we started seeing it more in adult, too. Especially as people my age. I am a sort of mid-range millennial, because I'm old. I wish we were seeing more like adults with fandoms in our books. Like, I want to read a thriller where instead of being a put-upon journalist, she writes for a fandom wiki or something. You know what I mean? Like, give her something else. It'd be really interesting. She's actually a prolific and well-loved fanfic author. And also she has a 9-to-5, because, you know, we can do that. We millennials might not be good at much, but boy howdy can we balance work life and fandom. Along with those themes of fandom, there's also lots of themes of found family in this book, so if that is one of your favorite things, this is definitely going to be the one for you. You know how queer teens, they find each other? Yeah, if you're queer and have ever been a teenager, you know. I loved the middle to ending of this book. I just wish the beginning had been stronger. I honestly thought about DNFing, but I powered through because so many people had recommended this book to me, and I'm glad I did, but I feel like the beginning could have been a little bit, like, less draggy. I think we just follow her in her ordinary life a little bit too much, and we take too long to really get going for me. And I'm not even a teenager, so I could see maybe some teens not wanting to stick with it. And finally, I wanted to talk about the asexual character I was promised. Any of you who are new here, I'm an asexual. Hi, hello, how are you doing? And asexuals are hugely unrepresented in media, so anytime that we find something with a on-the-page asexual in it, it's very exciting. What did I think of this one? Well, I was a little disappointed because I was hoping that the main character would be asexual, and she's not. We do get that distinction, which I like to see, of someone who is an asexual but not a romantic, because there is a lot of people who just overlap them as though they are the same thing even though they are not. And actually this character is on the ace spectrum more than he is just like asexual. Asexuality is a huge spectrum, and this character is actually demisexual. If you're confused by any of these terms, I do recommend you look them up. I'm not going to spend my time in a book review explaining what these things mean, but yes. I was a little bit disappointed because I was promised an ace character that it really didn't actually come up that much in the book. He is struggling with a relationship and wanting a relationship, and that part's cool, but it's such a small part of the book that I was disappointed, because the main selling point that people came at me with for this book was, Julian, you're always looking for a book with an asexual character in it. Here, I found you one. But it really wasn't that important to the story, which is fine. It's fine to have asexuals that, you know, just exist and are allowed to live their lives, but also are asexual. But I was really hoping it would be a bigger part of the story. Those were my thoughts about Radio Silence. Have you read it? Lots of people have, so feel free to drop your comments down below. Was there anything that I missed talking about? Even when I write notes, there are things that I don't notice or that I miss out talking about, so definitely feel free to add your own thoughts in the comments below. Also, let me know what your favorite piece of media is that has an asexual character in it, and why is it probably BoJack Horseman, because that's what everybody recommends to me. If you want a book that does have another asexual side character in it, you can check out my self-published fantasy romance, The Wolf and the Hawk. The main character is bisexual, not ace, but there is an on the page asexual character in it. Don't forget I post new videos here at least twice weekly. You can find even more content over on my Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to exclusive stuff not seen here on the regular channel. Don't forget that all the links to my social media are in the doobly-doo for ease of your clicking, and Nigel over here, and I will see you next time with whatever it is we happen to be doing next time. Bye! It has come to my attention that there may be a few people left in the world who do not know who my patrons are, and this will not stand. My patrons are Belle, Anne-Sophie, Callison, Ray, Artemis, Shelby, Zaire, Jesper, Irene, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, Amanda, Lisa, Sarah, Anna W., Anna C., Light Julie, OS, Lennox, Kit, Hayden Glade, and Persephone. There, consider yourselves educated on the best people in the whole world. You're welcome. Sex is like a tuna melt. You get more out of eating it yourself, even if you don't understand. Listen up and join the marching band. It's a-okay to identify with a